Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants. And I'm sure participants have been joining across different geographies. So what we are going to talk about today is how do we extend in terms of the problem that previous speakers mentioned, right? And the industry in general is facing today in terms of business being resilient and the new ways of working, right? I mean, everybody has to get adapted to the new ways of working. So we're going to talk about how do we create a digital thread, and this is the need of the hour to collate the data from all different places into a single platform and be able to provide the right insights to different stakeholders. So if you look at typically in today's scenario, and I hope I'm audible, right, Garima? Hussain?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So in terms of the current challenges, if you look at in today's scenario, I think all the enterprises are struggling or grappling with the issue of the business being resilient, right? And if you typically look at any of the enterprises, just give me a second, great. So typically, if you look at any of the enterprises today, right? I mean, they have three key tenants, right? And the workplace, and the workforce. And any enterprise you look at it, right? Especially manufacturing and all these enterprises today, when they are looking at it, business resilience strategy, there are again three key elements. Business continuity, which is a key part. How quickly and painlessly, would you be able to get back to business as usual? The resilience, which is nothing but how do you have inbuilt protection and safeguarding all your business asset, resource, and some of the critical data, and obviously the business recovery, right? I mean, ability to respond quickly and effectively by being agile, right? And lot of these challenges, if you see today, too much dependence on the physical workforce. The supply chain is all non-real time and non-transparent, right? It's broken all this, as well as majority of the system today, are on-prem or on the local cloud, which needs physical presence. And obviously, the assets and workforce are not connected, right? And especially in the current situation, some of the critical assets, especially manufacturing industry, right? The critical assets and processes cannot be stopped, right? So how can you ensure a business continuity? And this brings in, because of the challenges, this brings in a lot more opportunities, right? By bringing the right technology elements. And in fact, in the current situation, a lot of technology fast forward has happened in terms of the deployment. How do you deploy, some of the IoT enabled site inspection, ensuring the remote visibility, remote troubleshooting and operation, connecting the workforce and the customer, and bringing in an automation and digital twin, right? And the focus for most of the enterprise today is to survive, obviously, and go past the hump, but at the same time transform themselves by bringing in digital elements or the digital technologies and thrive, so that once the situation becomes normal, they have a new business model to be able to generate more revenue. So as I mentioned before, there are three key tenets, right? The workforce, and workplace, right? Now, if I have to break down those elements, again, there are various elements, right, which are very key in any enterprise, including manufacturing, right? Both discrete and process, asset, employee, customer, supply chain, and operation service, right? And some of the manufacturing companies have all these elements connected. Some may not have, right? Even the enterprises which have this element connected, they're still grappling with the issue because in their current environment, all the data exists in silos, right? I mean, there's no integrated view that you see for all these pieces together, right? And connecting these elements digitally, are the key things wherein we collate the data from all different different data sources, correlate the data, and present a unified view to different stakeholder, which would empower not only the internal workforce but as well as the end customer, right, to get a better outcome. And this is the new normal going forward, right? I mean, if you look at majority of the companies who have their system, and whole end-to-end asset, employees, and customer, right, are connected and be able to get a real-time feedback, they are able to thrive and be able to excel in their business today. So how do we create or stitch the whole pieces together, right? And which is where the digital thread comes in the picture, right? And we help industries, enterprise to weave a digital thread, by connecting all different components in their enterprise, in their current environment, and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned, the workplace, workforce, right? I mean, these are the three key tenants. All of them are connected and bring a real-time visibility to all different stakeholders, right? And those are the key things to overcome and thereby creating a digital thread. The new mantra as of today, and if you look at it, is a SaaS, right? It's not a software as a service, but they stand for speed, right? In terms of how fast you can get this digital thread up and running. The A is nothing but agility, right? How agile your platform is all about in terms of adopting the market needs, evolving technologies, and so on and so forth. The second A stands for accuracy. In this current situation, enterprise being digital, you need to have a single source of truth, right? And the accuracy is extremely important from customer perspective, from asset perspective, product perspective, right? Being a single source of truth is the key here. And the last is stand for the scale, right? In terms of bringing all the technology elements, bringing the robust PaaS services to make it scalable, not only for today's environment but going forward for all the future use cases. And the new currency, I mean, before, everybody used to say that oil is a currency, right? And now looking at the current for last few years, and the data has become key, right? I mean, how do you collate the data? How do you create the insight from the data, right? Is the key, right? So obviously that continues. But apart from that, the key piece is the experience, right? How do you bring experience to the internal stakeholders, which is nothing but the internal workforce, by making them more productive, by making them more collaborative, as well as to the end consumer, right? So the experience is the next key thing, right? Which is again a currency, right? I mean, the product which are giving a better experience, they are excelling, right? And obviously the trust, right, which is key thing in terms of, and if you look at it, anyone who is deployed mass product, and the people who are consuming it, right, they are trusting all their data. They're trusting that the breach will not happen, and which is where the security comes on the picture. So this is the new way of looking at the whole digital ecosystem. So if you look at any product manufacturing company, right, who manufactures a physical product, it is valid for any process product as well, right? I mean, look at different pieces, how it goes in the whole product life cycle, right? So there is an R&D team which designs the product, do a prototyping, do a complete testing, do some simulations, and once the prototype is working, as per the desired conditions, it goes to a manufacturing plant, right? And which is where it goes and does a mass manufacturing, and each of this manufacturing product goes through its own QA cycle, right, of the finished good to ensure that it's all up and running, right? So there's a R&D design phase, there's a manufacturing phase, and post the manufacturing, once the goods have been manufactured, it goes through a supply chain, right, which is where the deliver, right? It will be in the transit, goes to a distributor, dealer, retailer, right? And then it goes to end consumer, right, which is where the end consumer like us, or industrial end consumer, right, would start to operate the product, right? And once they start operating the product, obviously there will be replenishment, repairs, so on and so forth will happen, right? So obviously a service and return. So if you look at a typical product life cycle, look at there's a R&D design phase, there's a manufacturing phase, there's a supply chain phase, and then there's a usage phase, right? The product usage and service phase. So how do you? So all these pieces exist today. The only challenge that you see is most of the data gets generated from these different functions. Have fragmented technologies, fragmented operation. There's no integrated view, which gives them a real-time visibility to all the stakeholders and all the functions within all these four phases, right? And that's where the whole digital thread framework comes in picture, right? By having integrated view to be able to deliver the right information to the right place at the right time, right? Which is the key here. So basically, a digital thread nothing but refers to the communication framework that allows the connected data flow and the integrated view of the asset, and it gives various life cycle across this, right? These really help bring integrated knowledge base, right? Because many of the manufacturing enterprises would have multiple business unit, and each business unit would produce different variants of the product, right? So how do you create a integrated knowledge base across different line of business, right, to be able to provide the whole digital thread? So let's take example, right? I mean, if you look at any R&D design phase, the team would use different forms of tool, right, like CAD CAM tool for their own designing the product, right? If you look at go to manufacturing, the manufacturing factories would use the MES system, the DCS system, the SCADA, and so on and so forth. And if you look at the supply chain, which is typically deliver, they primarily will use ERP, right, to manage the whole inventory. And when you look at end consumer, when they start to use the product, obviously, you will use some kind of CRM, right? So there are multiple such business and enterprise system that's being used. So how do you create or collate the data coming out from all these different systems to a single place? And that's where the digital thread comes out of that way, right? Basically to create a digital twins, right? And when I say digital twins, obviously there are multiple twins, right? So which means that the R&D team, whatever tools, technologies that they're using, how do you create a product twin, right, as a part of the design phase, right? Once it comes to manufacturing, obviously the manufacturing plant would have different assets, different machines. How do you create a manufacturing twin, right? And once it goes to a deliver, how do you create a supply chain twin, right? And same way, once the product goes out of the retailer, the end consumer, how do you create a performance twin, right? And when you stitch all these different twins together, is where you create a digital thread, right? And which provides a better visibility, the transparency, across the complete life cycle. So that's where we need to kind of look at it, and it's a closed loop system. It's not like open loop system, right? Where the feedback coming in from all these different functions, and which would strengthen the learning based on the data and the insights, and then thereby improvise further. So it brings in the right insights, which help enhancing not only the quality, the visibility, transparency. It improves the productivity from the internal workforce. It reduces the time to market because you have the real time visibility in terms of the supply chain, as well as it facilitates the complete predictive maintenance, right, while the product is being used, in terms of what parts failure could potentially happen, right? And those parts could very well be procured ahead as a part of the supply chain, right, just to ensure that to provide a better customer experience. So that's a way look at it from a digital thread perspective, going forward. Now coming back to how do you create it, right? I mean, having talked about the challenges, having talked about what the life cycle is all about, having talked about what exactly the digital thread means, how do you solve the problem? I mean, it's not that people have to throw all their current existing business system, enterprise system, right, and bring a new technology and bring a new thing altogether, right? The way we kind of look at or approach the whole process is in the current environment or the current business environment of any enterprise or customer, right? They would have various the systems, right? I mean, they may have a sensor, they may have a PLC, SCADA, DCS, MES, and so on and so forth. Obviously, some legacy systems would also be there, right? Data would be in silos, the processes may be fragmented, there may not be real-time visibility. The consumer experience may not be consistent or uniform, right? So all those would be challenges in the current environment. And the way we look at it is, how do you paint a picture to literally visualize a reimagined state as how the state would look like once everything gets implemented, right? So we bring in that whole methodology of bringing a digital thread where leveraging leveraging technologies which are disruptive, IoT, AI analytics, cloud, automation, mobility, and so on and so forth, and really mine the existing processes, right? Obviously enterprises would have their own processes, mine the processes, re-engineer the process if need be, to create a value stream opportunities. On the south side, if you look at it, there's integration, right? So what we are saying is integrate with the existing system, right? As a lot of data would already exist in the business and enterprise system, right? So how do you create integration layer to integrate all those pieces together? Build a common big data platform by collating data from not only the real time, which is coming from the data sensors and so on and so forth, but also the data which comes from the other business enterprise system. Obviously modernize the application for a better experience, and the key important thing is how do we build a customer experience layer, right, which is where providing relevant insight by curating data from all different places to give a seamless end consumer experience, and which is where I think the important thing is, right, how do the consumer would like to consume the data in a frictionless way, right? And that's the key thing here. And if you look at on the north side, we kind of bring in orchestration layer, which really helps to choreograph all the components, within this platform, and bring the power of API economy, right, where to help monetize the service, right? And the vision is to bring, if you look at typically in today's world, uh, when I mentioned about workplace and workforce, right? The workforce that we talk about is a human workforce, right? But by bringing the technologies like a hyper automation, we can really bring not only human workers as well as the digital workers, right? Who can work together hand in hand, with the human worker, and then the human worker could able to collaborate better, do more productive tasks, right? And more of the mundane and repetitive tasks could be handed over to the digital worker. So typically, that's how we look at when we look at the technology, right? I mean, when we re-architect the reimagined state, look at all mundane and repetitive tasks, and bring in the digital worker, to help address those, and at the same time, the human worker could do more intelligent job, and be able to provide a better experience to the end consumer. So the way we look at the reimagined state is more like a open, an agile platform, which allows customer to plug and play technologies, because whatever said and done, right? I mean, this needs to scale. This needs to bring in scale, bring in agility for all the future need. And agility is the key here, right? How do you provide ability to reconfigure operation, reconfigure processes, in response to the market or the evolving needs, right? So that's a kind of thing that we create as a common platform, and the way we provide the business outcome or the business capital is completely reimagining the customer experience, right? By delivering personalized, rich, connected experience to different stakeholders, right? Which is primarily the external stakeholders, and by inspiring, by providing them the loyalty, and the reason we could be able to do that all the customer relationship management system, the CRM system, wherever the customer data is here, right? We're able to integrate to the platform. So we have the whole customer 360 view, right, in terms of providing that. And the next piece is, obviously, how do you empower the internal workforce, right? Which is where the key is, right? How do you provide them? How do you make them more productive and be able to collaborate better, right? And be able to, be ready to for any of the future need, right? And that's a key piece here. And obviously, to optimize the operations, right? Because once the data is available, or the integrated knowledge base is available across all line of business, how do you keep all the business processes synchronized? How do you bring in the automation to automate, or optimize some of the operations within the system? And last, but not the least, how do you transform the business model, right? Which is what the key is here, right? Most of the enterprises today, if you look at it, they're starting to look at the new the revenue generation model, right? By transforming their business from time usage to more like a recurring revenue base. So that's a key thing here. So that's how we look at it, as an approach, by looking at the current environment, looking at all the new disruptive technologies, and create a reimagined state to deliver the business outcome. And typically, when I mentioned about these 5 different phases, right? I mean, the whole design phase, and the manufacturing phase, the supply chain, which is the thing about tracking phase, to the end consumer using the product, and to basically while the product is in use, obviously there will be a replenishment repair, right? So how do you provide customer with a delighted service model, right? So it's a key here. So how do you do that is to build the scalable platform, the unified platform, right, to ingest the data from all different, as I mentioned, the data from R&D phase, data from a factory, or the supply chain, right? If I'm able to connect all the system together, bringing the customer and asset data into the same platform, right, and building a master data management, right, to have a single source of truth, and also ease up the onboarding process, right, from the asset to the end consumer, would bring in the key insight, or the key inputs for all the different stakeholders, right? And the way we do that is, we don't look at building everything from scratch, right? We look at the cloud PaaS services depending on the choice of the end customer, and bring in all those ready PaaS services, and stitch all those by having a common the infra and security. And I think the previous speakers also highlighted the security is very, very key thing, right? Because when we're collecting the data from all different sources, we need to ensure that all vulnerability penetration at every stage, right, needs to be looked at it, not only from the devices or the sensors, but at every stage, in terms of connectivity, in terms of network, in terms of API, all the places where the breach could happen, it needs to be looked at it. So security by default would be very, very implicit as a part of the overall design. And once we are able to connect all the system, you get a experience. I mean, just want to take example. Let's take mobile phone as an example, right? I mean, Samsung or any companies, right? When they build a mobile phone, obviously it goes, and it gets sold in multiple countries, right? And think about that a situation where in a particular geo, a particular version of mobile phone has some kind of failures because of some part, and it could be because of environment, maybe a high temperature, maybe a the cold weather or whatever reason, right? But if some of the parts are getting failed more often in that region, and more consumers are coming to the service center and asking, saying that these parts have been failed, if my systems are connected, right, the service center data would eventually go back instantly to the manufacturing plant, and thereby manufacturing plant team could enhance their test cases to ensure that those conditions are simulated in the plant and tested in the plant, right? And at the same time, it can also go back to the design team to ensure that all the future version of the product, they can look at it and see how they can either replace the part from different supplier to ensure that the failure is gone. So the intent that I'm trying to bring out here is how do you create a real time streaming data where every stakeholder could just peek in and get the right insight, what is relevant to them, right? That's the key to look at it. And if you look at, as I mentioned, right, so there are a lot of challenges in any enterprise, any manufacturing enterprise, right? There are suppliers, there are raw material vendors, there are the factories, there are distributor, retailers, dealers, and then consumer, right? So how do you create, a digital thread? And there are a lot of challenges in each of these functions, right? Right from the design team, they have different components that they need to, look at it in terms of their, the prototype. How do you ensure and ensure and validate and get a real-time feedback, right? By bringing those all supplier part to a common platform in terms of simulation, in terms of specification, as well as when it goes to a factory. Within the factory, obviously the supplier would have the raw materials, right? How do you do batch traceability? When I look at a batch traceability, let's say I gave example of mobile phone. If let's say if the mobile phone, the display has gone bad, how do I trace back saying that which supplier part the display was there, right? Since the finished good is already made, right? So if you're able to track back the raw material and if you're able to trace the cause of failure, right, it brings in a lot more visibility and transparency, and then reduce the operational cost in terms of the failure components, right? The connecting the production line, the quality. How do you ensure that the quality is one piece where a lot of interruption happens, right? Because most of the production line generates the parts or assembles the part or transform the part very fast because of the machine, because of the automated machine line, right? But the quality sometimes happens through a manual inspection, right? How do you bring in technology by AI, ML, using the leveraging the camera to help automate some of these pieces, right? And obviously connecting the workers, is the key here. Primary reason is to be able to look at safety and compliance from a manufacturing factory perspective. The energy management is again a key thing where almost 25-30% of energy gets consumed in any manufacturing industry, right? From the energy. So how do you figure it out? What are the critical assets which are being used for production and their energy consumption, right? And relate to the overall production capacity. So likewise, when I look at supply chain, once the product goes out of the manufacturing factory, where the products are in transit, if I'm able to get the real-time data in terms of consignment, in terms of condition monitoring, in terms of inventory monitoring, right, we'll be able to have a real-time insight as when it's going to go reach to the end consumer. In this case, it could be distributor, dealer, retailer, right? And once it reaches to the end consumer, people, I mean, consumer like us would start using the product, right? So obviously, if the product is connected, I could help monitor the condition. If the data is coming to the platform, I'll be able to also know the usage. I'll also be able to figure it out, the predictive maintenance, right? In terms of, when some part is going to go fail, right? And before the failure occurs, I could help, service that, right? So you're bringing in a lot more, better customer experience, than what was before, right? So, and which is what it goes hand in hand with the intelligence service, right? Where, how do you manage remote troubleshooting, right? In the current environment, that's a key thing here. Because not for every problem, the technician can go visit your place, even an enterprise manufacturing industry or a end consumer location, right? How do you provide a mechanism for the technicians to be able to remotely assist that and bring all those different technologies with regards to AR VR. So that's primarily, and I'll give you a best example is Apple, right? I mean, look at Apple. They control the design. They have warm kind of design. They also control their contract manufacturing factories. They also control their supply chain. And once the product reaches to end consumer, they are aware of what are being used, not at a privacy level, but at least at a level that when the parts are going to get failed, and obviously their whole service center, right? So that's the best example. They've created digital thread by having all these pieces stitched together in a very efficient and effective way, which is giving them a complete insight to all their different stakeholders. So how do we approach it? So having discussed about what we have done, having discussed about what the approach that we need to follow, what is the how do we go about doing it, right? And the key important point here is look at holistically. So we have our own framework, which is mindful thinking, 4E digital transformation framework, which basically, and the 4E stands for explore, envision, engineer and enhance. And the explore and envision are the really critical steps where we go back and look at the 7 steps where we identify all different stakeholders, from operational, functional, technology value chain, and then be able to create a set of questionnaires where we go back and try to understand their current state. I think Stephen mentioned about security. We kind of go look at their current state, also understand what future state they would like to be going forward, and from current state to future state, right? There will be a lot of gaps, right? And those gaps have to be addressed, and those are the gaps that becomes more like opportunity or the use case, right? Where we bring in the value creation benefits, and also relate that to what are the business benefit that the enterprise is going to get, right? And literally the clusterize those opportunities of the use cases, right, in terms of the business benefit and the implementation complexity, right? And then create a complete solution blueprint, and play back those use cases to ensure that all those use cases are being addressed, and then create a complete the implementation execution roadmap as how the solution blueprinting and how the implementation would look like when it gets implemented. So this framework gives a complete methodology or the approach in terms of understanding the current state, also understanding the future state, right? And what are the technology intervention that needs to be done, to reach to the future state, from the current state. These are some of the success stories that we have it, in terms of the energy plant where we have deployed similar thing. We also deployed in one of the largest textile manufacturing factory, as well as supply chain, one of the US customer where we built the whole end-to-end delivery system for tracking their oil and fleet tankers, and likewise the factory. So the intent here, what I'm trying to give out the message is by being able to connect all different data sources, be it enterprise and business system, as well as the real-time system, and then collating the data to common platform and bringing a layer which basically provides the insight to different functions, would be the key. Just to talk about a little bit on Happiest Mind, we basically are born digital, born agile, and that's where our majority, 97% of our projects or whatever implementation that we have done are in agile space, and in fact, 95% percent plus, our projects are on all digital, right? And we're nine-year-old startup company, pretty well placed, bringing all disruptive technologies, having done multiple scalable end-to-end deployment, and we also bring in a lot of reusable frameworks and component, right, which basically gets to get up to speed very, very quickly.